I didn't argue when he told me. He said it like it had already been decided, like the sentence had been spoken somewhere else, and I was just being brought into it late. "The house is sold," he said, reaching for his tea, "and the money will go to your brother. He needs it more right now. The vacation, you know. It's already booked." There was no pause for my response. No question, just a quiet assumption that I would understand. I laughed. It wasn't sharp or loud. It slipped out, almost polite, like I'd missed the tone he was aiming for. He glanced at me, slightly confused, but not concerned. That was familiar, too. My reactions rarely required adjustment from him. "Okay," I said, that was all. On the drive home, I kept replaying how easily he said it. Not the words themselves, but the ease. As if the house hadn't come from my mother. As if it hadn't been written clearly in her will. As if I hadn't stood in that same living room months earlier, holding paperwork he never asked to see. It wasn't anger that stayed with me. It was something quieter. A kind of disorientation. I realized I didn't actually know what had happened. Not factually. Only what he'd told me. And that felt insufficient. A few days passed before I did anything about it. I didn't rush. I went to work, answered messages, ate normally. But there was a thread running underneath everything, pulling my attention back to the same point. So I made an appointment. The lawyer didn't react emotionally. That was the first thing I noticed. No raised eyebrows, no sympathy, no judgment. Just a steady review of documents, dates, ownership details. "Was the property ever transferred out of your name?" she asked. "No." "Did you sign anything related to the sale?" "No." She nodded once, like a small confirmation of something already forming. "He didn't have the authority to sell it," she said. "Not legally." The sentence landed differently than I expected. Not dramatic, not relieving, just clarifying, like something coming into focus after being slightly blurred. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steadier. We went over options. Not aggressive ones. Just clear ones. By the end of the meeting, there was a plan. Simple. Procedural, quiet. A week later she called him. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be. But afterward, she told me how it went. Not in detail, just the shape of it. She introduced herself. Stated representation. Outlined the issue plainly. The property had been sold without legal authority. The transaction was invalid as it stood, and immediate steps needed to be taken to address it. No accusations. No emotion. Just structure. She said there was a pause on the other end. A long one, then questions. Controlled at first. Then less so. It didn't escalate. It didn't need to. By the end of the call, the tone had shifted. Not cooperative, exactly. But no longer certain. That was enough. I saw him a few days later. He didn't mention the house right away. We talked about ordinary things. Traffic, a neighbor, something on the news. There was a carefulness to it, like stepping around something visible but unspoken. Eventually, he said, "You could have just talked to me." I looked at him, trying to understand the sentence. "I did," I said. "You told me it was already done." He didn't respond to that. Just adjusted slightly in his chair, like the conversation had tilted in a way he hadn't anticipated. There was no apology, but there was something else. Hesitation, maybe. A new awareness of where the edges were. We didn't resolve it that day. Or the next. The legal process moved forward in the background. Quietly. Methodically. There were corrections to be made. Consequences to untangle. It wasn't clean, but it was real. And for the first time, it wasn't being defined by him. What stayed with me wasn't the outcome exactly. Not the house, or the money, or even the fact that he'd been wrong. It was the moment things stopped being assumed. I noticed it in small ways. The way he asked instead of stated. The way conversations paused where they never used to. Nothing dramatic changed between us. We still met. Still spoke. Still existed in that same familiar orbit. But something had been marked. Not loudly. Not permanently, maybe. Just enough that I no longer felt like I had to adjust around him. And that, more than anything, held.